Hey guys, it's Mrs. Olenichek, and today we're going to talk about meiosis. Last class we reviewed mitosis, which is where we have one cell that divides into two identical cells. So today we're going to talk about meiosis. And meiosis is all about creating variation in offspring. So all these puppies look different. Here you have some random family. And you notice that while everybody looks similar, you can tell that they're probably all related. No two are exactly alike. So every cell has a nucleus, and every nucleus contains DNA, which are organized into chromosomes. The number of chromosomes that are found inside of that nucleus actually depends on the species that you're looking at. So humans, for example, have 46 chromosomes. That's 23 pairs of chromosomes. Chickens have 78. Frogs have 26. Peas have 14. So the number of chromosomes doesn't necessarily indicate how complex the organism is. It's just related to the species. And this is also one of those things that prevents different species from reproducing with each other. Alright, so on those chromosomes you have genes, right? So chromosomes are made of DNA, and a section of DNA that codes for a particular trait is called a gene. And so that's how your DNA gives you your traits. So now when we look at your 46 chromosomes, they're actually organized into homologous pairs, so they have sets. These homologous pairs contain different versions of the same genes. So here you see something called a karyotype. This is a picture taken of your chromosomes. This is actually, they're all duplicated, so this is one pair of identical chromosomes, and this is another pair here, and we say these are homologous because they're the same size and they code for similar traits. So this right here may code for blue eyes, and this right here may code for brown eyes, but they both are coding for eye color. You can kind of think of it like a pair of shoes. They are used for the same thing, but they're slightly different. If you've ever tried putting your left shoe on your right foot, and you need both of them to go running. So they're similar but not exactly the same. The same thing is going to be true of homologous chromosomes. They're very similar, they code for the same traits, but they're slightly different versions of those traits. And in humans you have 23 pairs, right? So this you got from mom, and this you got from dad, and all together you have a complete set. This karyotype here would be for a boy, and I can tell because this 23rd set, you have an X and a Y chromosome. So if you had two X's, it would be a girl, but since you have an X and a Y, it's actually a boy. So when we look at cells in your body, also known as somatic cells, so we call cells in your body somatic cells, all the cells in your body, or most of them, have a complete set of chromosomes. So one from mom and one from dad, so you have 46 chromosomes, or 23 pairs of homologous chromosomes. And we call these cells diploid cells. Diploid because you have both pairs. Sex cells, or gametes, that's sperm or egg. Boys, you have sperm, girls, you have eggs. Have only half of the chromosomes, or 23 chromosomes, so they only have one of that pair. And we call those haploid. Sometimes we represent diploid with a 2N, and haploid with just an N. So here you have just a diagram. You have a diploid cell that has all the pairs, so 46 individual chromosomes, and then a haploid where you only have half of the chromosomes. Here you have another picture of those karyotypes, and you see the homologous chromosomes. So this up here, you can find the homologue. So this, let's see, where would he match up? I think he would match with number 16. If you put them together, those would be two homologous chromosomes. Alright, so when gametes combine, the zygote gets half from mom and half from dad. Zygotes are diploid. So this is an example of kind of a life cycle. You start off with your parents. In this case, we're looking at fish. Different organisms have different life cycles, but fish are pretty similar to us in this aspect. So you have two adult fish that are diploid, so they have a complete set of chromosomes. They each undergo meiosis and create two haploid cells. Mom creates a haploid egg, dad a haploid sperm. Those combine during fertilization to form a zygote, which is now diploid. So two haploid cells combine during fertilization to form a diploid zygote, which will divide by mitosis to form an individual that will grow and develop, and the whole thing starts all over again. So meiosis results in haploid, fertilization, you get back to diploid, and then you grow and develop through mitosis, which creates more identical diploid cells. Lots of vocabulary, really. We're just going to go through all the vocabulary now so you don't get confused later. So again, when the sperm and egg meet, the chromosomes must match up properly for the zygote to develop. And that's, like I said before, one of the reasons why organisms of different species can't reproduce with each other, because they usually have different chromosome numbers. Alright, so here I want you to review the vocabulary, make sure that you can figure out what each of these are. You can pause me, you can go back. The PowerPoint is linked on the class website too, so if you want to go back and get all of the vocabulary words from there, you're welcome to do so. Boop. So, now let's talk a little bit more about meiosis. So when you create these gametes, you do it through a process called meiosis. Meiosis is a little bit different from mitosis in that you want to make these daughter cells that are different from the parent. So you're not, in mitosis, you make an exact copy, right? So you have a replication. So you have a diploid cell that replicates all of its DNA during synthesis, and then divides to form two identical diploid cells. So your little 2N over here. Whereas meiosis, you still have this replication initially, but instead of lining up single file, notice here that you line up kind of double file. And so these are your homologous chromosomes. And if you look carefully, you see here you have two homologous chromosomes. So here's the maternal pair, here's the paternal pair, so from mom and from dad. And they line up, so you have 4 chromatids. And this is going to be called a tetrad. T-E-T-R-A-D, a tetrad. And it's just where they line up homologous chromosomes together. So they line up together and they separate once, and you get 2 haploid daughter cells, right? So here you started out with 4 chromosomes. Here you only have 2 chromosomes. Even though they're still replicated, you just have 2 chromosomes. And now, instead of replicating again, they go through a second division with no replication, and you end up with 4 haploid cells. Oops, sorry about that. 4 haploid cells. And so you started off with a diploid cell, and you end up with 4 different haploid cells, and the process is going to be called meiosis. When meiosis occurs in females, it's called oogenesis, because you're making an ovum or an egg. And spermatogenesis is in males, where you're creating sperm. But they're both just forms of meiosis. So here is an illustration of the steps of meiosis. And here is a link to an animation. And so what I want you to do is go to this animation, go through the description of the different phases, and use those descriptions to fill in the chart on your homework sheet. I'd also like you to try to color in the different chromosomes so you can follow them through. And when you're done with that, come on back and we'll finish up the rest of this. Alright, so now that you've seen the phases of meiosis and you've heard about the results of it and you can compare it to mitosis, we're going to talk just a little bit about why it's so important. And it's so important because it allows for variation in offspring. It's what makes you special. It makes you different from all of your brothers and sisters and from pretty much everyone else on the planet. So all the variation you see occurs because of meiosis. So not only are you a combination of genes from your mother and your father, you're a unique combination of those genes. So even if you have 12 brothers and sisters, you're all going to be slightly different. And there's a reason for that. So one of the major sources of this variation is something called crossing over. So during prophase 1 of meiosis, you have homologous chromosomes pairing up, right? And when they do that, when they form this tetrad, they actually get all mixed up together and they exchange material. And when they do that, you'll notice this little bit here and this little bit here have exchanged with each other. And so in the end, you get 4 unique gametes, so 4 unique combinations of genes. So just because you inherited the gene that might be located over here from your dad doesn't mean that the gene over here is necessarily coming from your dad as well. And this happens on all 46 chromosomes. So there's lots and lots of different combinations that you can get because of crossing over. So that's one source of variation. Another source is this idea of independent assortment. So that the way that the chromosomes line up during metaphase, which side they're on, has a huge impact on the resulting daughter cells. So this is kind of a simplified version where you only have 4 total chromosomes, 2 pairs of chromosomes, and look at all the different combinations you can get here. And so where this chromosome lines up has no impact on where this chromosome lines up. And so you have lots of different combinations or independent assortment. Again, this is another major contributor to genetic variation. And last but not least, you have random fertilization. So all of those unique egg and sperm that are created all combine randomly. So what sperm is able to fertilize that egg is really up to chance. And so all 3 of those are going to contribute to variation in offspring. So you have crossing over, independent assortment, and random fertilization. I hope that helped. If you have any questions, make sure you write those down and make sure you ask them when you next come to class. If you look at the end of your homework sheet, there's another video I'd like you to watch. It's in Bozeman Science. Check it out and use that to answer some of the questions on your homework sheet too. All right, see you tomorrow.